Very cool. Okay, well, I think I see 4 o'clock. I think we've got most folks. So we will go ahead and get started. So we'll start with the roll call. Anderson?
Here.
Bork?
Here.
Buchanan?
Here.
Clayton?
Here.
Grimm? No Ben today. Harrelson here. Cruzy?
Here.
Krylov?
Here.
Murray?
Here.
Peterson?
Here.
And Shetty?
Here.
Good deal. So then, hopefully everybody got a chance to take a look at last month's minutes. So are there any corrections or updates that need to be made? And if not, then can I get a motion to approve?
So, motion. Clayton motions.
Clay?
Bork seconds.
Okey-doke. Perfect. And any opposed? Okay. Then the motion passes. Do I have to say in favor?
Take a vote.
Okay. Yeah, in favor. Oh,
Yay.
okay. Sorry. Got myself all twisted up now. Okay. Yeah. Motion passes. All right. So now we're moving on to announcements and reports. We got some action items from last time.
So in the last meeting, we talked about staff looking into the costs associated with obtaining a Pearl report. That cost is only associated with realtors who would want to download the report. And it's not the report, it's the marketing materials that go around it. We have reached out to Pam Brookstein to set up a meeting to discuss further, and we'll bring that back to you. We also were going to relay the information on the Pearl white paper that Tom Martinez, who is attending from Greater IC last month, had looked into. It turns out the white paper basically says, the information for the preliminary score is based on publicly available data, but it doesn't talk about the methodology behind it. So it tells us essentially what we had already known. And then there was the question of identifying potential Pearl competitors, and this actually became really an interesting thought exercise, because as we started thinking through it, I think at the last meeting we had even mentioned that we had come up with a worksheet that we use with residents, and that as we were thinking through it more, we often direct residents to the Electrification Coalition, Electrify America's website, where we actually have set up events where we've invited members of the public to come and fill out their little calculator. And whenever anybody reaches out to our office, that is often what we recommend to residents, because it's a really easy tool for folks to use, and it tells you not only how your energy performance of your home could be improved by certain updates, but also any rebates or incentives that might be available. So it's very useful. In thinking about these, though, it occurred to me that a lot of our discussion had focused on these tools to be used by residents, and I was coming up with all these examples of other things we've done with residents, and it occurred to me that actually the question at hand, and the reason we were looking at Pearl, is because the priority action that had been developed was to find a tool that could be readily used by remodelers to parallel the HERS program. And so in some ways, the discussion of engaging residents, though interesting and important, is secondary to, does this seem like a tool that our remodelers could use, or they could use in conjunction with their realtors. So we are going to circle back with the Remodelers Council that had actually raised this question for us the last time we went and talked to the HBA about the HERS program, and get their thoughts on it. And then we will bring that back to you once we've had that conversation. But I think this is why Pearl, in particular, the fact that it had a certificate, what led us to this product, because it has a certificate that parallels the HERS certificate and is legible to realtors the same way HERS is. I'm not sure there is another competitor in that space, but we'll keep looking, and we'll have that conversation and report back to you on it. So thank you all for the excellent discussion on it. It was really helpful to hear. And I'm glad the conversation went the way it did, because it allows us to take that conversation then to the remodelers when we talk to them and say, here are the pros and cons we saw as we looked at it as potential consumers of this product. So And then the other, an action item from the last meeting was just to set a new benchmark to revisit and review the HERS incentive program when we achieve a 50% adoption rate among new homes built. So we have noted that in our records, and we'll do so when we reach that happy milestone.
Great. Perfect.
I guess I'll continue
Yep.
with the announcements then.
Yep.
One little one I wanted to give you a heads up on. As we've been going through an internal review, we have determined to change the name of our division. We have been called the Climate Action and Outreach Division. We are going to be moving to calling it the Sustainability and Innovation Division. We're doing this for a couple reasons. The biggest one is just if you look nationally at what offices like ours are called in other cities, it's more standard to call it a sustainability office. We looked around through the Urban Sustainability Directors Network to see what other names for other offices were out there. And we ended up really liking sustainability and innovation. It turns out Ann Arbor, which is another Big Ten college town, uses that to call theirs. And part of what we're thinking is, as we're hiring in emerging professionals, this just makes it easier for them to apply for jobs in other cities should they go to other places. It also addresses some things that we've heard during the comp plan discussion about, and actually our own discussions in the community about wanting to see our office do a bit more with nature-based programming, for example, which doesn't fit necessarily under the climate action plan, so we've not done a lot with it. Calling ourselves sustainability and innovation opens the door to do a bit more of that. And I will just say on a personal level, I like it because I think the other thing we hear is in the community is that people don't just want a technological response to climate change. And I think innovation gets to some of the technological work we do, but sustainability, acknowledges there are other approaches to the work that we can be approaching as well. That is probably a more elaborate description as to why we're doing it than is actually necessary. For something that is largely an internal change, we just wanted to let you know so that if you see the change in our signatures, you're aware of what it is. And in fact, we are not abandoning climate action or the climate action plan. That still remains like 95% of the work we're going to be doing, if not more, and we'll still be using that logo. We're actually developing a new logo for the division that will interlock with it. So that whenever we're out in the community in climate action, we've got that brand continuity that we've worked so hard to develop over the last 5 years. And I will just tell you, half the people in Iowa City call me the sustainability coordinator anyway. So I don't think this is going to be a big earth-shattering move, just something we wanted you to be aware of.
Will we change the name of the commission?
No, the commission will remain the same. And that is one of the reasons I wanted to mention it in this meeting. The commission will still be called the Climate Action Commission, and we will still be focused on the work of the Climate Action Plan. So it is not that big of a change at the end of the day, but just something for your general awareness. And in terms of upcoming events, we have our Bike to Work Week breakfast that is going to be taking place next Monday from 7 to 9 a.m. Actually in a location that's visible from here on the left side of Chauncey Swan Ramp in that nice area where there's the limestone seating. The Iowa City Free Lunch is going to be helping prepare the breakfast burritos that we're going to be serving. We'll also have cookies and coffee for cyclists. We've got on that side of the ramp one of our bike racks from the bus mounted, so we'll be encouraging people to practice putting their bikes on the bus. And it'll be a nice fun event. So if any of you bike to work and would like to stop by, or if you don't and just want to come and represent the Climate Action Commission, you are certainly welcome to do so. It's always, I think it's one of the most fun events we do during the year. And then there will be other Bike to Work Week events throughout the community that will be taking place as well. So if you miss ours, you can go to the one at the county, or there's one, the university is sponsoring one as well.
Yes, it's actually the following week, and it's just because next week is finals week. And so, and it's bike month, and so they're calling it just a bike breakfast. But it's at the Siemens Center, Breezeway, if you all know where that is, between the engineering building and Lindquist on the 20th, which is a Wednesday, that morning.
And then the other event we really wanted to put on the radar is the Solar Power Hour. As you may recall from the last meeting, we talked about how we're participating in the Grow Solar Group Buy program. We are going to be hosting our kickoff event for Iowa City at Big Grove on May 26th at 5:30 p.m. That is free and open to the public. So there too, if you'd like to come and represent the commission, please feel free. And actually, the Midwest Renewable Energy Association sent over flyers today that can be distributed through the community. So if any of you would like one to take back to your place of business and help advertise that event, I am happy to provide that at the end of this meeting.
Can you remind us which counties are eligible for?
Oh, I'm gonna mess this up again this month.
Sorry.
It's Johnson and Lynn County, Washington, Iowa, Benton, and Cedar, I think. Is that 6? Let's say that was 6.
Okay.
Yeah. Are there other events in the community taking place you all would like to mention?
Can you say just one sentence about what happens at the Solar Power Hour?
Sure. At the Grow Solar Power Hour, there is a presentation given by a past participant in the program who talks about the basics of putting solar on your own property and how the group buy program works. And then there is an installer present who can get you signed up to have a free home assessment as to the solar suitability for your property. Our office is going to be raffling off a solar phone charger to try to help increase participation.
That's good. Thanks.
I could say more, but I didn't want to make it a run-on sentence. It was long enough.
Are commissioners eligible for the raffle to participate?
That's a good question. Let me check with legal.
Don't check with me.
I will find out and follow up with an email.
Nobody had any other events, right? Yes.
I will mention one more.
Oh.
Sorry, it's not on the agenda because it's not our event, but the Bike Library today sent over information on their Bike and Beats fundraiser, which takes place June 13th. They are a Resilience Hub partner for the city, which is why I wanted to mention it. In addition to the great event, which runs from noon to 10 p.m., they are in need of volunteers, and they asked us to mention it to commission members specifically if you're looking for a volunteer event to participate in the community. We can certainly send more information your way if you're interested in doing so.
Did you say the date?
June 13th.
Okie dokie, thank you. So then for old business, we have a few things. We're going to start with a sort of refresh and recap on the Energy Blitz.
Speaking of commissioners volunteering, we had 2 commissioners volunteer at the Energy Blitz this year, which was really exciting for us. So I will just say we knocked on over 470 doors in the neighborhood. It was a very successful event. We collected, I think, 140 pounds of batteries and 33 pounds of light bulbs, which when you think about how light bulbs are, that's a lot of light bulbs. Even though this is one of the smaller neighborhoods we've been in, per capita, I think it was one of our biggest battery grabs in the history of the Blitz, so that was very interesting. Clearly there was a need to clear those out of homes in the neighborhood. Those are the big numbers. I thought it might be fun for our commission members to share a little about the experience as well. Any highlights that either of you would like to share?
I really enjoyed it. Zach and I were both on the morning shift. It was nice. I brought my fiance, Zach brought his husband, and it was nice being able to introduce him to this part of my life. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. We had a family on our team, and the kids got really involved. They really enjoyed actually delivering the kits to the doorsteps. People were very appreciative. Some people weren't sure what it was for, but once we explained it to them, they're like, "Oh, okay." So yeah, all around good time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was the nicest weather we've had for an energy blitz in like for the however many years I've been doing it. So that was pretty nice. But yeah, it's always really great to get to like, I feel like it's a tangible, you actually like see the community, get to interact with people, and like you feel like you're actually doing something, right? Like we can calculate up how much energy those light bulbs are saving or whatever it might be. So it's really cool.
I had a resident tell me that they had received a box and their husband told them, "Do not open that. They're trying to sell us something." And so she told me that, and then I said, "Well, no, you can open it. They aren't trying to sell you something." She said, "Oh, okay." I'll open it then.
Awesome. The assist from afar. Yeah, I appreciate it.
This brings us to a question that actually came up in discussing the Blitz. I know in talking with you all, one of the things we often hear from commissioners is a desire to do more direct service or more hands-on things. We could consider next year, instead of hosting or having our regular May meeting, suspending the May meeting and encouraging everyone on the commission to volunteer at the Energy Blitz at the end of April. I know May is often a busy month with graduations and what have you, and we don't often have very pressing things to discuss. Would this be something that you would like us to pursue next year? Or we would take it up again next year when we've got new folks on the commission so they have a chance to weigh in. But if you all are like, no, that sounds like a terrible idea, then we can just put it to bed here.
Sounds good. Excuse me. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, yes. Yes, that sounds great.
Since my knees can be dodgy sometimes, if I could be at a table to help give the boxes out to whoever's going to take them to the door. Sometimes I can't do door to door. I never know. So, but I think it's a great idea. I'm all for it.
All right, so we'll circle back to that in the January meeting then and see if that's something we'd like to pursue. And we actually have to have we have to have a staff member sit at the muster point in case anybody comes back off the route or goes out. And I can tell you, having done it myself many years, it is a lonely, lonely job.
Yeah, well,
So
it's
if
like
you'd be
a
open to-
Walmart greeter. I'm open to that. That's fine.
Great. All right, and then similarly, the next item is an update on climate action grants. I thought it'd be nice to hear from members of the committee just share out about that experience as well.
Yeah, it was really fun going through all the applications. Some, like, the level of effort, I think, really varied between applications, but there were some really good ones in there. I was excited about the heat pump water heater application for a restaurant, I think on Lynn Street. They were trying to get 2 new units in there to replace an old, I think, gas system. So that one was cool. There was like a application for a solar powered coffee roaster, which is kind of cool. Those like more innovative ones were really exciting. And then there were like a lot of church window replacements and things like that too, but it was fun. Yeah, I had a good time.
Yeah. I learned a lot. It was cool seeing the varying things that people were asking for and how it related to climate action. It was a lot of fun.
We tried a new process this year where we provided a cover sheet, and I realized neither of you had experienced it the other way. Was the cover sheet helpful in reviewing those
I think it's
applications?
just like jogging my memory when we were ready to talk about it. I could look at the cover sheet and be like, oh yeah, that was this one.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I want to note Catherine volunteered for both the Energy Blitz and reviewing these applications, so gold star, Catherine. Well, I'm happy to report that now that the scores are in, Daniel Bissell is reaching out to the applicants and letting them know how many we're able to fund. The funding for this for the last several years has come out of the general fund. This year, it's one of the items that's been moved to lost. Some of you may recall the vote that was put on the ballot about a local option sales tax. one of the things we're going to do is try to get all of the grantees under contract before the end of the fiscal year, which will allow us to pull some money forward so that while lost dollars are accumulating, because people have to spend money before we can bring in that money to pay them out, we'll have a little bit of funding that we can use for, we always have 1 or 2 projects that like, they can begin on July 1st and on July 2nd, they have their invoices to us. So we want to make sure that we're able to reimburse them as intended when that happens. But the good news is there were so many high quality applications this year that we were able to take a close look at our funding and think about how we could not only compensate for, letting time for lost funds to build up, but also use some of those pulled forward funds to fund a few more than we have in years past. So get excited for the end of the year and the beginning of next year. You're going to be hearing from more climate action grant awardees than you had this last year, which is exciting. And I think in the spirit of one of the top priorities you gave us, which was to increase the funding and reach, I think we definitely are going to be able to say we did both this year.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. Okay, and then also we have an update on Grow Solar again. Is there more to say there?
Just that we've got additional solar power hours scheduled. One's going to be commercial focused. It's being hosted by Greater IC. Now Coralville, North Liberty Hills, and Cedar Rapids all have theirs scheduled as well. And then I have reached out to ICAR about the possibility at the end of the Grow Solar program of hosting a training for realtors that's specifically about selling homes with solar. And they are very excited to collaborate with us on that. So that'll be a nice end of program offering. And our hope is that once we offer that training, then we can reach out to folks who've participated in the Grow Solar program and say, these are realtors who have this training specific to your home. One of the reasons we thought that was an important offering, and do stop me if we talked about this already, is that in looking over the data from the last time we did this, one of the great pieces of data that came out of that was that 60% of the folks who went to a solar power hour like the one that's going to be at Big Grove and then signed up for a free home energy assessment chose not to move forward on getting a solar array, which is of course their prerogative. But we wanted to try to better understand why. And of those 60%, 60% of the 60%, which is confusing, said that they actually had the financial wherewithal to afford the array, but they didn't feel like the payback period was short enough. And with the federal and state tax credits being gone, they were present for the last one, they're not for this one, that payback period is going to be even longer. And so the reason we took a close look at this data was to try to figure out, is there anything we could do to help overcome some of these barriers? And one of the ways we think we can do something helpful is to make it clear that even if you leave your home before that system pays for itself, the payback period, you can still recoup the value of that investment the same way you would on a bathroom remodel, or you can tell I don't sell houses often. Like the things people do to increase the value of your home, solar is one of them, right? And we think, looking at the data, that may not have been fully factored in. So we want to make it clear that there's support for that in this community. So those are the big updates there. If anybody would like more information, we're going to be starting to offer some virtual solar power hours as well. You can see where they're all getting lined up at the program website, which is growsolar.org/ECI for East Central Iowa.
Good deal. So then we can move on to new business. So we've got an impact on climate action activities. Impact report.
I gotta tell y'all, I was so excited about the climate action grants and the energy blitz, having you all talk, because I'm not gonna talk to this whole meeting. And now I'm talking this whole meeting. Okay. Those of you who've been on the commission for a while know that we've been having a lot of discussions about how do we capture the things that we've been doing that don't necessarily show up right away in our greenhouse gas inventory, right? Because some things like the greening of the grid that Madame has been diligently working on show up very clearly because they impact every household all at once. When we're impacting maybe 100 households a year or 200 with various programs, that's not going to show up in the greenhouse gas inventory until many years down the road. And because we're doing so many things at once, it's really hard to tease out like this accomplished this reduction and this accomplished that. On top of which, as we think about the value of our climate action programming, the other thing we've talked about is how do we make it real and tangible in people's lives in a way that talking about greenhouse gas emissions just isn't. Like when we talk about a ton of emissions, could anybody say like how many tons of air are in this room right now? Right, it's hard to get your arm around. So we wanted to try to make some of these invisible impacts more visible. And we also wanted to create a report that could run parallel to the reprioritized climate action report, just as a more comprehensive way for folks who don't, like you, get to hear about these reports month after month on the work we're doing, to see the kind of work that's gone into the last 5 years. And then I will also say, with increasing frequency, we are hearing from other communities who are asking, what are the kinds of things we've done? How can they copy it? And so we wanted to have some public-facing document on the webpage that would talk about these programs so that others could find their way to us. And I will say the importance of this was underscored to our staff just last week when two of us were sitting in on a webinar from the Electrification Coalition, which does a lot of work around EVs and municipal fleets. And they said, well, we're getting ready to publish 3 case studies, one from Iowa City, Iowa, one from Madison, Wisconsin, and I think the third was Portland, Oregon. And the two of us who were listening in on that webinar were like, wait, what? So we know that people do take a close look at these documents, and most of the time they reach out to us, but sometimes I guess they just share the results. So important for us to have some good ones up there. In addition, we will be presenting this presentation tomorrow to City Council as a kind of report on the last 5 years of effort we've been doing. So if there's anything in particular you hear in this that you feel is missing, let us know so that we can highlight it in that discussion. You all, of course, have read the more detailed reports. So I'll skip over the executive summary except to say that it just covers our vision, which is that every resident and every business and every organization in Iowa City has an opportunity to connect with the climate action report or climate action plan and feel like they have the resources and tools to make a meaningful contribution to the city's climate action goals. And a lot of what follows in this report is just detailing the ways that we've been trying to achieve that. And the first section, we look at our Iowa City residents. This photo is actually from our solar tour last year as part of Climate Fest, which was so sweet. The first program we looked at is Root for Trees, which it has planted more than 1,700 trees. And I will say we have been getting a steady clip of applicants, even through the weekend and today, even though that vouchers will officially close or have to be redeemed by May 15th. So we see increasing interest in this program year after year. And we anticipate we will break the 2,000 tree mark sometime actually after we account for all the redeemed vouchers from this year. So that's really great. These trees, of course, yield a number of benefits, not just to the beautification of the city, but we talk about how they can reduce ambient air temperature, how they're important for supporting reducing stormwater runoff because of the root system. And we wanted to highlight the fact that every dollar spent on Root for Trees has yielded an estimated $4 to $10 in value for the residents who are participating in it, just in decreased energy costs and increased property value. We did have a more precise number there, but I will say one of the other things we did was run an analysis of like the most common trees that have been purchased through this. And the analysis or the dollar number that we had assigned to it was based on like nice big hardwood trees. And then we saw, oh, we've got a whole bunch of red buds in the mix. So probably not the same carbon sequestration or energy reduction benefits there, but still really useful. And I actually want to put a little pin in the red buds because I'm going to circle back to it later to talk about something new that's on the horizon for us. And you'll also see here, we printed an important lesson learned about how we approached that program when we first started, which was to give out a list of like 25 eligible trees. And now we just published the 2 ineligible ones, which you have all heard about. But this is something that we get asked about by other communities that reach out and say, have you ever considered having a preferred list? And so we thought it was really important to capture that lesson and be able to share it out. And, you know, it's important to talk about things that haven't worked as well as things that have. We also talk about the energy audits that we've been doing. And this one, we decided to go back a little further than the last 5 years because that program really started ramping up in fiscal year 2017. But so far, we've reached over 1,200 households and provided a variety of wonderful services. We like to tout the fact that they catch gas leaks. That's often a really important and unsung service. Even though it's not the original intention of the program, we think it's a really valuable one. And at the bottom, we talk about how sometimes, well, one of the things we hear from residents, particularly residents when we talk about our insulation grant program, is the idea that a home can become too tight. And so it's really helpful for us to have this program to be able to say that doesn't have to be a concern. And in fact, we can send a team in that will measure the total air exchanges in your home per hour and let you know if your house is approaching that too tight level. Even though our insulation grant program is called insulation grant, we actually provide for ventilation and air sealing under it as well to address that. It's just a real mouthful when you're out in the community to say insulation, air sealing, and ventilation. So we wanted to make sure that we just are pointing out that that's a really comprehensive program for us. And then, of course, that brings us to our insulation grant program, where we note that here too, it's like this is the year for passing the 2 mark. We're going to pass 200 homes that have gotten insulation through our program and 2,000 homes that have gotten trees. And the really great thing is we do have some good utility data, because one of the things we do with this program is ask people for 12 months of utility data before and 12 months after they get the insulation. And that data shows us that they save about $100 annually, which of course adds up year after year. And then we have this just wonderful quote from someone, a resident in the community who participated in the program. And the thing we really wanted to highlight here is not only is Frank quite possibly one of the sweetest people who lives in Iowa City, but he actually used this as a jumping off point to begin the electrification process for his home. And just last week actually sent us a spreadsheet containing data that he's been tracking on his home energy usage since he got a heat pump. So he got the insulation, then he got the heat pump. He even adjusted it for temperature, which is just amazing. So program I think that we're really proud of there. Like, insulation is not something you often hear about in other city programs, and that, John, as you've pointed out, is one of the most meaningful things an individual can do. So we're very proud to have this program here. The HERS incentive you all have heard about in a lot of detail, so I won't spend too much time on this one, except to say, you know, one of the things we'll be saying to City Council is that this is an important and ongoing partnership with entities that often are at odds with the city in other communities. So we're proud not just of the energy savings, which, you know, are appreciable, but also that this has been a real bridge for builder for us here in the community. And as you know, last year, 1 out of every 3 new homes that were built got a HERS rating, and I have every finger crossed for the new development going in under the form-based code that we'll get certificates for all of those properties as well. The Whole Home Energy Retrofit Program is one that we haven't talked about as much recently, but those of you who were here when we first brought this forward will recall that this was a program that we were essentially the first city to try bringing forward. And it solves this question that is a big one and an ongoing debate in energy efficiency circles, which is how do you improve the energy efficiency of rental properties without driving up rents, right? How do you do this in a way that doesn't further exacerbate the affordability crisis for our homes? And so we think this program is fairly innovative and we're really proud of it. I will say one of the things that is not on the slide, but I think is worth noting is that when we put this in, we immediately shared it out with our network of other Heartland cities who do similar work. And Lincoln, Nebraska was actually inspired by this program to try something similar. On the day that Iowa City's free transit program was featured in the New York Times, there was another article on the same page that was about Lincoln, Nebraska's program, increasing energy efficiency in return for a commitment to maintaining affordable rent. And so I, maybe as the only person in the world, felt this way, but I looked at that and I was like, look at Iowa City. We're in the New York Times twice in one day, just secretly. So we actually have 4 landlords and 5 participating properties, and our 5th landlord just signed up, or is in the process of signing up, I should say, this month. And that was the target we had for the pilot program. So we're going to do that and evaluate it and then determine the future of the program. But I think there too, it has engendered a lot of really interesting conversations with the landlords who are participating.
Is that for apartment complexes?
It's for single-family homes.
Okay.
Yes, it's for single-family homes in part because we can't afford to redo a whole apartment building yet, but it is something we do have an eye on.
I was wondering if there are specific lessons learned from the pilot so far, or if that's something you're still analyzing.
Well, one of the lessons we've learned is that landlords really want to put in new windows in their buildings. Like that seems to be the thing that attracts them to participating. Windows aren't necessarily the highest value energy efficiency measure you could take. But I think by having the funding amount we have, one of the things we've been doing is trying to stay in conversation with Lincoln about their program because they offer $10,000. And so they have to be a lot more choosy about what they're funding in the program. For us, being able to say, yeah, you can have your windows, but also we would really like you to think about heat pumps and insulation. I mean, it has been a little eye-opening to me how many landlords we've talked to for whom insulation is just not on the radar, even though it's very cost effective, right? So I would say that's one of the big lessons we've had is that allowing for windows has allowed us to have some of these other conversations. But also one of the things we've been talking about with Doug Black, who's the staff member in housing who helps us administer this program, is that the next time we roll this out, to get more, what we'd like to do is bring in a home energy rater who could be like a neutral third party saying, here are the really high value things and presenting it to us and the landlord at the same time and making it very property specific. We do want to recognize that landlords know their properties and have their own priorities, and those are not illegitimate, but to bring in like a third party to provide that analysis, I think can help us get even a little further in those conversations. So, great question. When council brings it up tomorrow, I assume you will be the one to answer that. Yeah.
I doubt it.
All right. Advancing EV adoption. In this slide, we wanted to talk about our participation in the Eastern Iowa EV Readiness Plan for 2 reasons. One, that plan set a goal of getting 46 publicly available charging plugs throughout the city. And we actually have met that goal, which is great. So we're doing great, as you know, for public charging. But as you also know from our discussions, 80% of charging happens at home, and this is one of the reasons we feel very strongly about continuing to offer funding for EV charging at condos and apartments. One of the big lessons we've learned here, and I think we've talked about this before, is that initially when we rolled this program out, we were only going to offer it for level 2 charging. But what we've learned is that a lot of apartments and condos that have enclosed parking, which are the prime candidates at the moment. I mean, we would entertain it regardless, but those are the ones who seem most interested in it. Many of them don't actually have electrical outlets in those parking spaces. And so just being able to say, well, we will help you put in those electrical outlets is appealing to them because it doesn't just have to be for EVs, right? That's a value add for their residents. And actually doing level 1 charging turns out to be enough for most purposes for most people living in the city. So it's a cost-effective measure and one that we've talked about increasingly when we've gone to talk to landlords and condo associations about this. I will say out of probably all the programs in the deck, this is the one that has gone through the most tweaks. You know, when we started out, we also were offering up to $5,000 just to cover installation costs because at the time, Mid-American Energy still had incentives in place to help with EV charging equipment. And what we were hearing is that the installation costs were often as big, if not bigger, a barrier. When that incentive went away, we expanded our funding to say, well, we'll cover a 50-50 share of the equipment and the installation to try to make up for that. That's when we also started offering level 1 as well as level 2 charging. And just recently, in this last year, we upped the amount we were offering to $10,000 just to recognize that prices are going up. I will say one of the biggest barriers we've heard, and we haven't figured out quite how to solve for this, other than this is where level 1, supporting level 1 charging across the board becomes more appealing, is landlords' biggest concerns are like, who's gonna tow the EV that just parks there all day when others want to use the charging? They're like, yeah, we'll take the city money if the city will also come and tow these vehicles and handle these landlord complaints, which we cannot do. So just trying to, it seems like what landlords need and HOA associations need as much as the funding is just someone to help them think through, well, how could you manage that? What are the kinds of software that are available that would help you do that in a way that's not necessarily going to create more conflict between residents. We also had a landlord who had a very interesting idea about wanting to just offer it publicly and charge for it for the neighborhood. And that turns out to violate our zoning code because you don't want an apartment parking lot to be treated like a gas station where people are coming and going. And that's also been, I think, an opportunity to have some meaningful conversations with our fellow staff members to say, well, EV charging is different. Like, even if you open it up to the neighborhood, you're not going to have cars coming and going at the same volume that you would at a gas station, right? It's going to be, a car an hour or less. So, very interesting program.
Have there been conversations about who pays the electrical bill?
There have been conversations about that. And so one of the things we talk about when we talk about with landlords and condo associations is that charging sessions typically cost less than 50 cents per session. And if you don't have a lot of residents with EVs, this may be something you could comfortably offer as an amenity. The way parking is a kind of, amenity that is often subsidized by apartment buildings. But for those who do want to recoup some of that cost and not ask other residents to help pay for it, which is essentially what happens, we talk a lot about software support. And in particular, we talk about, lessons we've learned as a city about looking for open source software platforms versus proprietary. So something like ChargePoint, which is all on ours, bills itself as being open source, but in reality it isn't, and that can lock you in long term. And sometimes that trade-off for the little bit of cost recovery you're going to get for the electricity is not worth it, to be locked into something that's going to cost you thousands of dollars a year for software support. It's a great question. Yeah.
I had thought, and I guess I'm wrong on this and thinking more about it, that there were stations, EV stations for charging that you simply used an app. Mm-hmm. You could go to different apps, and then when that station was registered through not only that app, but other ones like it, but you chose an app, then they would go ahead and they can charge you as you used it. So there was no like going through the landlord or anything else. It was set up that it was just all independent.
Yeah.
And these apps were competing against each other for business from customers. And I don't know.
Your understanding on that is correct. There are different companies. ChargePoint has come to really dominate the market. They provide both the equipment and software and the app that residents would use, and they wouldn't go through the landlords. So this is exactly the conversation we have with the landlords. If you don't want to get into it, then you can pay to have this subscription and they will charge residents directly. And yeah, sort that out. But the flip side of that is you're going to pay many thousands of dollars more, both for that equipment and that software.
I didn't understand about them being locked into it. I thought
Yeah.
perhaps some of these companies were setting up these stations on their own, and then, okay,
Some are.
okay, so it's really hodgepodge.
It is a little, although there are some trends that are really emerging. I will say the city, we have 2 charging stations out by the softball fields in Napoleon Park that are open software platforms. So the equipment, you buy the equipment and then you buy the software separately. And if we ever want to try different software, we can end that contract and try a different one, which is really nice without changing out the equipment. And one of the reasons we maintain those 2 that way is exactly so that we can continue to experiment with this should we ever decide to move away from ChargePoint. You know, if they just keep charging more and more and we'd like to try something less expensive or more accessible, we at least know how some of the competitors kind of work. But yeah, I think what you're getting into is the exact thorniness of all of this. If you put in level 1 charging, you can just plug into the wall and you don't have to worry about it. Although there are also some smart outlets you can get that landlords could use to track the specific electricity usage at that outlet, and then they could attach that to the bill for the resident if they wanted to manage it that way.
No,
No?
that's considered sub-metering. You're
Is
allowed to do it.
Oh, thank you, Wim.
Yeah.
Well, good to
I mean,
know.
they could do it in as long as no one knows, I suppose. But technically, you're not supposed to. The charging part is the problem. Charging for it. Yeah.
So they couldn't just add it on to the regular electric bill that they, okay. Well, I'm glad we've never actually gotten anyone to try that. Good to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are we okay moving on? And please do keep stopping as we go through. Like, you're helping us figure out what we're going to be talking about with council, so it's helpful to have these conversations. Okay. Climate action grants. This one was really interesting to me. I should know this, but I didn't until I saw the figure that we have funded more than $360,000 in climate action grants in the last 5 years, which is amazing. Most of those awards have gone to energy related products, but you can see, or projects, you can see we tried to break it down according to the 5 sections of the climate action plan. An interesting thing to me in this graph is that transportation is smaller than it is in our emissions profile. So one of the reasons we tilt toward energy projects is because how we power our buildings, as you know, is the largest source of emissions. In Iowa City, the second largest source is transportation. But you can see it's really at the bottom of things that we've had people apply for. This year, in our climate action grant applications, for the first time, we had people applying for e-bikes, which was a really exciting development for us. Part of that, I think, is a credit to Diane and her work. We asked her in the last year to create a handbook for climate action grant or a toolkit that they could look at. And one of our goals for that was to list example projects so that for folks who aren't thinking about transportation necessarily, we've at least said, hey, you know, one of the things you could apply for are e-bikes or electric vehicles or, you know, other things. And I don't think it's accidental that we then got e-bikes up in the applications this year. So that's great. I will also note one other potential reason why transportation might be a little low is that we do have that separate grant opportunity for EV charging. And so they may not be going through the climate action grant process in the same way. Although we do have one hotel in town that did apply really early on for a climate action grant to put in EV charging. So we have had at least one historically. The big thing we want to emphasize here is that these grants, when I talk to members of the community, particularly members of the community who don't feel that climate action should be prioritized quite to the degree that it is in Iowa City, I often like to point out that a lot of the things we do are things you would want to do even if you were not concerned about climate action, right? And all of these grants help reduce operating costs for the business and nonprofits. They help support local employment, and they help create, innovative workplaces here in the community. This was really driven home for me this year when we were doing our climate action grant workshops to try to raise the profile. We had one at the greenhouse just across the street here in collaboration with the Iowa City Downtown District. And we were talking about how this business had itself received a climate action grant, and a question kind of came up about taxpayer money being used to fund these projects that benefit one specific business. And I was able to say, here's the thing, because we're supporting these local businesses with these projects that help them reduce costs and do the kinds of things they want to do, we're able to have this conversation here in the greenhouse, which is locally owned and operated, as opposed to, a TGI Fridays, right? I have to try to pick a business to pick on that doesn't actually exist in Iowa City. We don't have a TGI Fridays, right?
We used to have.
Oh, no. Well, if only they had gotten a climate action. So, and then the other reason we have the climate action grants is also to identify other opportunities for grant programs. And we list two here that have come out of this. One is the reusable food container grant, which you all know about. And then also Burr Oaks project to help support native shrub plantings. That's one that we said rather than apply year after year, why don't we go ahead and set up a ongoing program, because it just slots so nicely in with Root for Trees. Like, we want to be supporting those understory projects as well. There actually is, I should point out, if we'd had room, it was really important to us to listen to the awardees, but I will say one of the lessons learned here is one of the first opportunities we looked at was a separate solar grant program for nonprofits, because there was a couple of years where we had a lot of nonprofits applying. And so we went out and asked local nonprofits, hey, if we put something like this up, would this be of use to you? And what we learned is basically we had funded solar for all the nonprofits that owned their own buildings, and all the others, it wasn't quite viable for them yet. So that was an idea. We looked into it. We didn't pursue it, but it's still valuable, to be looking for those trends. And we definitely are when we look at these applications. Who knows, if we keep getting e-bikes, maybe that will be an e-bike program.
Yeah. I don't know if it's on purpose, but the Iowa City Bike Library is on there twice for the. Yeah.
Thanks for the catch.
Yeah.
They have gotten 2 awards,
Okay,
so that
let's
may
look
be
at
how it
them.
happened. But thanks for that catch. We'll get that corrected.
Is the reusable food container grant catching on? Are there people participating this year?
It is. We've had preliminary conversations with 2 entities, one of which has decided not to move forward this year, but are very excited to apply next year. It just had, how it gets sequenced with their business. And then another, I can't really name names until we've got the contract signed, but another, I will say, was a climate action grant awardee who came in and spoke to all of you, and we mentioned the reusable grant in that meeting, which they were not aware of, and then they got very excited and have been talking with us about doing that in the future. So stay tuned. I'm really excited when we get this contract signed to talk about, who's signing on for that. And then we just, mostly because council's not had the benefit of hearing these presentations, we included a slide of some of the more recent presentations we've had, so they have a chance to hear more directly from participants about the value of the climate action grant for them. Neighborhood Energy Blitz, as you know, is one of our more fun projects. Over the course of the last 6 years, we've engaged over 200 volunteers to participate in it, which is really nice. We have some who come back year after year. We have some who come and go. We have some who participate once, but then talk about how much they love it. So across the board, and I will say one of the things I just really love about this particular volunteer opportunity is that it is truly multi-generational in a way that you don't often see in volunteer activities. And, you know, Catherine talked about the little kid who I think we all fell in love with, and I'm pretty sure delivered at least half of all of these boxes. And then housed a bunch of coffee when he got back to the station, which is interesting. We also, in a climate action first, had the police called on us this year by some concerned residents who were worried that we were a sophisticated porch pirate operation stealing Amazon boxes. But the group that they happened to call on were just some truly sweet and very tickled volunteers from Oakville who I think really got a kick out of being thought of as being nefarious. So I don't know that I'll mention that one to council, but yours to enjoy. The Neighborhood Energy Blitz, we put on a slide talking about climate ambassadors as well, because actually many of those volunteers have been climate ambassadors, and in fact we time it each year to come at the end of the climate ambassador training so that people who go through that training have an immediate opportunity to volunteer should they so choose. As you know, the Climate Ambassador Program has also been, I think, a great success for us in that we have a base of volunteers who really seem to enjoy engaging with the program. Many people who've gone on to serve on the Climate Action Commission, including our own chair, have gone through the Climate Ambassador training as a starting point. And now we offer it to commission members because it is such a great training. This is actually one of the data points that I was most interested and surprised by, that of the 78 ambassadors we've trained, continued engagement rate is 69%, which means people who have volunteered at least two events, I think is how we tallied that up. One or two? Yeah, we'll double check on it. But what's really, I think, impactful about that is if you look at other comparable programs, even something like the Master Gardeners, you tend to see a drop-off after people go through trainings. A lot of people want the information, and that's legitimate, and we want to provide it, and they don't necessarily want to continue being involved. For a program like this, typically you anticipate about a third of the people who go through continue to remain actively involved a year after they go through their training, so that we have such a high participation rate of people. Actually, I don't think it was 2 times. It was like within a year, 2 years of participating, coming to at least one more event. Like, that's pretty great. And I think a real credit to Megan and now Kendall, who run those programs, for maintaining those channels of communication. The other way we support volunteers in the community, and I will say this is one of the things we most consistently hear, not just from you all, but from other members of the community, is they want to be doing something hands-on. It is really important to us in our office that those are meaningful volunteer opportunities. We do, of course, support the Project Cleanup Program and litter pickups, but I think one of the struggles we've had all along is that there is not an obvious climate benefit to getting litter off the ground. Like, all the climate impact has largely happened by the time that item is manufactured, and the disposal, a lot of this material is inert when it goes to the landfill. There is a bit of a connection in that we see increased storm events, and that can wash all that litter into our waterways, which of course we want to avoid. But I think if you sit and think about it for like 2 minutes, you realize that litter pickup is not the most satisfying volunteer opportunity that people can have. It's also just like gross, right? So we wanted to think about more meaningful things we could do, and this really started with the Spot the Hot engagement effort, where we trained folks to drive around on predetermined routes on the hottest day of the year and help us collect temperature data. That was such a wildly successful program that it led to the CocoRouse training we did the following year. We brought in a meteorologist from NOAA to come and do that training. And it's really funny, if you go to the CocoRouse site and pull up, like, they will show you where all the weather stations are that people have set up to collect precipitation data. Iowa City's dense. We have a lot of really engaged volunteers with that, which is fantastic because we get all really great localized precipitation data as a result of it. And that is not helpful just for us, but also for national and local climatologists looking at it. And then, of course, last year we had our bike and pedestrian traffic count, which was also a lot of fun. You can see we got nearly 15,000 observations collected from all these different points. I think people at the highly trafficked intersections, where there were a lot of people walking and biking through, almost felt overwhelmed by making all the tick marks, right? So that's been really interesting, and that information was immediately shared with the engineers working on the Burlington Bridge project. So it's already being put to active use, and then also being used to inform the Bollarded Protected Bike Lane project. This is where I want to circle back to the red buds. Remember I said, let's put a pin in that. And actually it's relevant to our discussion about the name change for our division. As we are thinking ahead to what the next volunteer activity could be, I have Kendall looking at the National Phenology Network as an opportunity for us. And phenology is a practice of noting when certain natural phenomenon happen each year, like making a record of it so you can see if things are happening earlier and earlier in the year. It's just another way of tracking the impacts of climate data. And there's some things that I think are really interesting to us about this project. One is that it could be potentially tied to some of those Root for Tree vouchers that we've been handing out, because one of the data points that the National Phenology Network tracks is the emergence of buds and then fruits on red buds. And we know we have planted a whole bunch of red buds in Iowa City recently. So we could reach out to those folks and say, hey, would you like to participate in this and just keep track of what's going on with your red bud for us? There are other natural phenomena that people can track as well. And, you know, I'd mentioned with the division name change, one of the things we've been thinking about is how do we do some natural area engagement that isn't already being covered by our Parks and Rec staff, because they do a phenomenal job with managing our natural areas, and that's not something we would wade into. But this would be a way of providing an opportunity for the community to be collecting data on natural area phenomenon and seeing it tied to some of the climate reporting that we're doing. And it also would be an opportunity to do some sort of deeper volunteer supported data collection, in that phenology only really works if you do it year after year after year. So instead of having to come up with different kinds of data collection each year, we could just keep enrolling people to collect the specific kinds of data we've identified for our area and create a longer historical record. So I can't say for sure we're going to do it, but I will say that our office is very excited about it, and I'm looking forward to Kendall's proposal very much. And we'll bring it to you all when we're ready to roll that out so that you can hear more about it.
I have a question about the bike and pedestrian traffic count. Do they have a metric of avoiding double counts?
Yes and no. Did you participate in that?
No, I was just curious.
Yeah, we sent people out in pairs, and we recommended that in their pair they come up with a system. And what we recommended was like one person take the north-south corridor and the other person take the east-west. Diane, you participated in that. Do you want to speak to a little of that?
Yeah. Well, I think part of your question, Heather, might be like, what if somebody was counted at this intersection and then they were counted at another intersection? We just said they're at two intersections. They're biking more in the city. So yeah, we said that that's a valid data point.
Okay.
Yeah.
And a little bit that was, we consulted with the MPO on that, and they said, that we want to see both if you're using two corners, we want to know about those two corners, because obviously you wouldn't put a crosswalk in one and not the other, right? Oh. I mean, well, you could if one was really not being utilized, but.
So it's more about collecting usage at certain locations rather than like overall usage by people.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And part of that was initially to determine like where's the best place to put our bollarded bike lane, like where are we seeing a lot of bike and ped pressure, where they may need to be protected. But that data is very useful for other things, and that's become very clear. You all know about Climate Fest. I won't bog down a lot in talking about it. Other than to say, for me, on this, rather than report out like we had this many people participate at this event and that, because they vary from year to year, so it's hard to compare. The most important takeaway for me on this one is just that this is an exercise in annual reporting to the community. And I will say I am myself very proud of a lot of the work that happens in our Climate Action Office. But I am especially proud of this because there just aren't a lot of communities that do this. You will see like strategic plan updates that get published and put on a website and presented to council. But we have made our annual reporting something that is immersive and creative and accessible to the community. And I just think that is so cool. I kind of want to write my professors at graduate school about it. But on this one, we just highlighted some of the more recent ones, such as the Solar Art Fair, which was a slide that we'd shown earlier, and the Fare Free Transit Trivia Night, just to show just how creative some of this programming can be. So this first part of the report really looks at things we're doing out in the community. But we also wanted to speak to things that are happening within city departments and divisions as well. In part to say, one of the other really important things we've done as an office, I think, is take a whole of government approach. Sometimes when you look at other cities, you'll see, actually often when you look at them, you'll see that sustainability or climate action kind of gets pigeonholed in its own little office, and they do kind of they do as much programming as they can, but they're really doing it in isolation, right? And we are not siloed here. We have made it the business of every department and every division to help move climate action forward in the city. And that really shows when you look at some of the bigger successes that we frankly would not have been able to have on our own. Like, we would not have been on our own able to move forward on fare free transit, but we had a transit department that said, what is it that we need to be doing to move forward on these climate goals? So some of those things you're already familiar with, but one of the things we wanted just to recount is the ongoing facilities improvement. And this is something that you all had identified as a top tier priority continuing for the next 5 years. So you can see we've done all kinds of things like putting in new windows and HVAC systems, installations that have been added to this building. We have solar arrays that have gone on and a long list of LED retrofits. And then we have like larger whole building programs or projects rather, like the Public Works building, where it wasn't just a tweak here or there. It was a fully designed building from the ground up, meant to be very, very energy efficient. And of course, you all are aware of the two big projects we've got going on with this facilities right now. The heat pump water heaters that are going to go into our pool house at City Park, and the biodigester methane capture system that's going in at wastewater treatment plant. The City Park pool project will be completed this year, later this summer. And one of the things we're already talking about, I've got my fingers crossed, is that we could do our film screening out there since it'll be available year round, which would be kind of fun. And then we will have to think of something fun to do at wastewater. Though I will say, the city is getting ready to celebrate on May 30th Public Service Day, and we're going to be bringing a whole bunch of city trucks down to the farmers market for kids to touch, to highlight public works efforts in the city and celebrate our public works staff. And one of the things we are going to be doing as our offering for that in climate action is in city council chambers, we're going to be screening a movie called Unless the Worst Could Happen, which is a look at wastewater treatment plants as actually the original environmentally focused operations that cities adopted. And so sort of the history of that, but also the challenges they're facing now with things like PFAS. How do you get that out of the wastewater stream? I will say, if anybody wants to come, we're going to be having back-to-back screenings throughout the farmers market that day. So you can come and see a portion of it, or you can stay for the whole thing, whatever you want to do. But the film is so fun. I've been describing it to people as like a buddy film set in a wastewater treatment plant. So good times. And then of course our wastewater treatment staff will be there to talk about the project, so that'll be fun. We also talk about our transportation projects. And I will note, because Fare Free has been reported on extensively to you and the council already, one of the things we wanted to highlight on it that doesn't, I think, as often get highlighted is just, gasoline is the largest expenditure for households for energy on average. The average Iowa household spends over $3,000. This is about twice as much as they spend on electricity. So we want them to be drawing down both for climate action purposes, right? But being able to offer a free form of transportation can truly be transformative to household budgets. Even if they're not using the bus to go everywhere, if they're only using the bus for half their trips, cutting your gas bill in half brings it down comparable to what you're paying for electricity. And that's valuable, especially one of the things that I've been thinking about since the New York Times article ran is that we, like a lot of cities, are trying to think about what can we do to reduce housing costs, right? And realistically, it's going to take a long time to build out housing stock to help bring down housing prices. But reducing transportation costs is something we could do immediately. And I think we've heard over and over from nonprofits in the area whose clients use our transportation system, how transformative that's been for those households. So it goes back to what I was saying about we're always looking for the things you would want to do even if climate change wasn't a concern, even if you have other priorities. And then the other thing we do in this is provide an update on our electric fleet and things we're doing to support it. We have the city's PD e-bike on here, in part because this was such a great entry point to talking about electrification of the police fleet, right? We got the bike, and then from the bike, we were able to expand our efforts, not just to community service vehicles, but to the first patrol-rated EV in the state. Which I will say, when the news station came to do a piece on it, they really were at great pains to get our officers to say, you got an EV because they're faster, right? And although normally we do like to tout the high performance of these vehicles, that was not why the PD got it. And so we really resisted taking the bait. And then they sliced in a clip from a police force in Georgia saying they got them to be faster so that they could get the message out. Good for Georgia, I guess. But I will say, we just recently saw data that's being collected on the police EVs, and I think a lot of other departments are taking note of this, that the EV fuel costs are coming in at about 8 cents per mile compared to over 20 cents per mile for the police vehicles, which is really nice. Nice savings there. You all know about the Climate Ambassador Program. You may not know that a few years ago we launched a parallel program for staff, and we've trained over 30 staff members now in this program. They go through something sort of similar where it is a deep dive in the climate action plan, but then we also look at specific city operations to say, here's what's going on in other departments, just to kind of foster those conversations. And one of the great things that has come out of this is staff climate ambassadors saying, well, what are the kinds of things that we can do in our departments, or what can we bring forward? And so this has led to a number of things, including the induction cooktop demonstrations that get held at the Public Library and the Senior Center. We've had ongoing webinars that we host in collaboration with the Office of Human Rights, including one coming up this month, which I'm realizing now should have been on our agenda, where we're hosting a webinar on transportation planning approaches that incorporate non-drivers into the planning process. And then we also last year produced a guide on best practices to reduce food waste and align like things that we're buying for city events, just to make people aware of the climate implications of the things we're buying and how to do a little better as a city. And I will say, actually, this recently got used. The Parks and Rec Department is planning an event with National Night Out. And our communications staff, in working with them on the menu or the catering, was like, hey, I know you're thinking about grilling hot dogs. We actually have this great document that was produced by city staff that has example menus. The ambassadors who participated in it also identified local businesses that cities could work, or the city could work with to bring in these items. And so it was really nice to see somebody knew that resource existed and passed it along for an event. And then we also wanted to highlight one that is particularly creative. as you have experienced the many temperatures in City Hall on your time on the commission, you probably are aware that we maybe don't have the most cutting edge HVAC system. And although long term the plan is to replace that, short term, there is the day-to-day comfort of city staff members to be addressed. So a couple years ago, we were working with facilities management who was talking about just how often our boiler cycles on and off in City Hall, and how this is one of the reasons we have difficulty maintaining an even temperature. And they asked if we could work with them to, we've used the AmeriCorps team in the past to do an audit of LED lights in all the buildings. So if you ever need to go, they said, could we do an audit just to find out how many space heaters are operating in City Hall? Well, it turned out it was 40, which is a lot. It's also a real safety hazard. I think our fire marshal about had a heart attack when we came to the department head meeting and talked about that. And when we were thinking about ways we could address this, one way to do this is to encourage staff members to use heating pads on their seats rather than space heaters. Heating pads are safer. They don't ignite if they tip over. They're also incredibly energy efficient in comparison. They use 90% less energy, which is amazing. Unfortunately, it also feels a little weird to go around to your colleagues and be like, hey, do you want to use this thing that I can feel a little weird using in the workplace? And so what we did was work with our climate ambassadors who tested out 6 different models for us. And we had these like little forms they would fill out, and we were keeping a spreadsheet and like identifying not just some key metrics we asked them about, but their comments as well. Oh my gosh. All right, I'm going to be mindful of time. And from that, we whittled down to two models that we wanted to use in City Hall or offer up to city staff. And then the climate action staff said, we've been learning a lot promoting energy efficiency measures to the city. What if we took everything we've learned and put it into this marketing campaign with our climate ambassadors to encourage people to use the heating pads? So we identified our early adopters through the climate ambassadors, and then used them to help promote it to other city staff members. We also renamed the heating pads. So instead of saying, you can have heating pad Sunbeam XJY 1000 or whatever, we simplified the names and we called them the Luxe and the Plush. And then we sent out a message to everyone in City Hall that was called Premium Heat for Your Seat. And we talked about how they're just like the heating, what you would pay for an upgrade in your vehicle to have a heated seat. All the same experience with the heating pad in the office, right? It's immediate heat directly to your body. It doesn't heat up the air, which means it doesn't trigger the thermostats and cause the boiler to cycle on and off. And I will tell you, when we rolled this out, I was like, boy, if we're lucky, we'll replace like half of the heating pads. I thought that was a pretty ambitious metric. We actually replaced 36 out of the 40, which is amazing. And we have a city council member who uses one at all the council meetings now, which is really fun. So it's, I would say in many ways, our humblest climate offering. I will tell you for sure, there was a moment where I was like, I can't believe I have 2 master's degrees and I'm talking to people about heating pads. But incredibly impactful. Like, it has really reduced strain on the HVAC system, and it's got us just, I think, raised awareness of just how energy intensive the space heaters are. It's so popular, we actually have opened it up now to all city departments, not just in City Hall. Because when the library heard about it and the senior center, they're like, we get cold too. And so if we can get out ahead of those space heaters, we actually have people, when they get hired in now, their divisions will send them up to us and say, hey, we've heard there's a program for space heaters. I'm a new employee. Could I get one? So that's really nice. I think it's if nothing else, it is a proof of concept that, the tools we have been developing all as we've been working our way through all these other programs really do work. And, we have figured some things out about how to market these things.
A follow-up question. Was there discussion about people who use standing desks and how they could make use, or if there's like an equivalent?
Yeah, I mean, most city employees do have standing desks, but they don't use them every hour of every day. Mm-hmm. And so we found it hasn't been so much of an issue.
Okay.
We did find, in case any of you are inspired to do this in your own workplaces, There is a slight health concern. There are some people with some conditions that heating pads can exacerbate. And so for them, we've said, a space heater might be the best option for you. And we want to be clear about that we're not trying to shame anybody out of using a space heater. I actually think the ones we didn't replace are directly connected to those particular health concerns. So it seems like everybody for whom it was a viable option really did take us up on it. I have one of the rejects on my desk downstairs if you ever want to see one. Okay, just a few more slides. I think of this as the Nadia slide, because one of the things, Nadia, you have talked to us over and over is that when we go out and give these presentations, you want to be sure City Council knows that we are, that we're giving these talks, to state and national audiences. And thank you for making that a priority. I also want to say, one of the other reasons we chose to highlight this is, the Climate Action Plan asks for us to be leaders in the sustainability space. And very clearly we are. You'll notice a lot of these start dating from 2022, and you'll see there are more each year. There are more 2025s than there are 2024s. And that's, as we go out and speak, people become more and more interested in the work we're doing, to the point now where apparently they'll develop case studies without us knowing about it. But these are just all the places that we've sent staff talking about different programs that we've had. And I will say it shakes out to about half and half. Half of these, as I'm looking at them, are ones that we have said, hey, we're doing this cool thing. Would you like to hear about it when we come to this concert? Actually, it might be more than half as I'm looking at it. More than half may actually be by invitation. Like the International City Council or City County Management Association National Conference, that's one where they reached out to us and asked us to come and talk about our EV efforts. The same for Argonne National Lab. That was a thrill for me. That's the first time I've ever had to get a background check before going to give a presentation. But we are continuing to have these conversations, and I'm sure if we did this slide next year, we'd have even more to add. And then the last section of slides we talk about is just our efforts toward resilience. And the thing we really want to emphasize here is talking about climate adaptation does not mean we are giving up. It's not an either or, it's a both and. So adaptation in the city has taken a number of forms historically. One is buying out homes that are located in the floodplain. I don't know if anybody saw, speaking of the New York Times had an incredible article just last week about the Iowa Flood Center. Not catch it? All right. I will make a note to myself to send this article to all of you. In part because it talks about the low-cost monitoring devices that are available through the Flood Center for cities to use. And as the federal government has pulled out monitoring stations, at least in Iowa, we've been able to backfill with some of these resources. One of the most interesting things to me about the article was that they were talking about monitoring along a creek. And of course, you may recall we recently had a discussion about do we need to be thinking about creeks as well as rivers. So I will share that just for general edification. We also, in addition to all the trees we planted through Root for Trees, the city in the last 5 years has planted more than 4,000 trees on public areas and more than 200 acres of prairie. And I really think that prairie is worth celebrating because those of you, I don't think it was during any of your time on the commission, but you may have been aware when we first rolled out the prairie projects in 2020, there was some community pushback and we had to reduce the initial plan to 80 acres. We have since planted those 80, then 80 more, and even beyond that, right? As prairie has taken hold, I think it's just grown in acceptance across the city. And actually, we've just been in conversation with the county. They have a pocket prairie program for private landowners, and we've been working with them to begin offering it in Iowa City as well. So they're going to, maybe my favorite part of it is that we're not going to run it, the county's going to keep running it, and we're just going to help get the word out to our residents. So we'll be putting prairie in private properties as well. And then, of course, we increasingly have a program, both through our climate ambassadors, and we've been doing some community programs where we hand out resilience starter packs for homes. So we've been able to reach more than 200 individual households with some of those packs and information about what you would want in a kit, for when disaster happens. Resilience hubs, about. You're going to be hearing from NCJC here in a coming meeting about the emergency power generators that they've been putting in. I will say, when we were talking about giving national presentations, this is one that increasingly we were asked to give. In fact, on Wednesday, I'll be participating in an online forum that reached out to us and said, you're doing really cool things with resilience hubs, and we'd really like it if you could talk with some other interested cities. And one of the things that makes our resilience hub program really unique is the year we spend first planning and coming up with an individual resilience plan for that organization. And what's really nice about that is it means that we're not just sort of, coming into an organization and saying, we're going to put solar panels on your roof, now you're a resilience hub, right? We're going in first and saying, you're doing great things to contribute to resilience, and we want to recognize that and figure out how to help enable you to continue to do that, even in a period of disruption. We want to figure out, what does resilience mean for your organization? One of the things we've learned in this process is that organizations that don't have an emergency operations plan tend to cease operating within 2 years of a major disaster. So we want to make sure we've got those kinds of plans in place for them. And then we say, what would you like to fund? Like, we've got this funding, looking at your plan, what are the priorities? So it really is catered to the needs of those individual organizations in a way that I think has made us a true partner. We talk about co-creating programs. This is a clear example of like a more patient approach enabling us to do that. Keep Cool Iowa City is an initiative that flows out of, remember that very first data collection thing we did with Spot the Hot? That effort collected over 83,000 data points, which is amazing. It helped us create a map that we've been using for things like identifying where new street trees should be prioritized. Transit's looking at it as they're thinking about new transit, the words leave me. It's not a transit station.
Bus shelter.
Thank you. Where bus shelters should go. But we're also starting to try to think and communicate broadly about what the reality of climate change means for the city. I think flood impacts are fairly well understood because we all experience that flood. Less well understood is, a future in which basically every day in the summer will be above 90 degrees. And what do we need to do to prepare for that? Our Parks and Rec department is definitely thinking about as they're adding more shade structures to their playground equipment. But we are thinking a lot about how can we be having cooling stations at community events. We're going to be doing more of those this year. And of course, one of our early efforts that's proven really popular is handing out cooling bandanas at these events. So something people can dunk in water, wrap around their neck or wrists, and it helps keep them cool at those events. Yeah. And then we get to next steps. And this is part of the reason we put resilience at the end, not because it's not as important as other things. I would argue it is just as important, but because a next step for us is in the coming year to begin a new climate vulnerability assessment and an adaptation plan that's a little more robust than the one that's currently in the climate action plan. One of the things that seems very clear, I think, that probably everybody who's just lived through the hottest March on record, is that the effects of climate change are accelerating in ways that the models may not have fully predicted. So we want to first take a look and say, what are the models saying now? What are other hazards that we may need to be thinking about? One of them that I think was not on the radar 5 years ago was wildland fires. And we're seeing some grassland fires happening in Johnson County now. So we want to be thinking a little about that. We want to come up with a more robust adaptation plan. You'll remember from our discussions about talking about building in climate adaptation principles into city facilities. And we're like, we actually don't know what this looks like, right? So we want a plan that helps us think through, future facilities, what do we need to be doing to make sure they are hardened against the impacts of climate change. There's a nod in here to your work on the reprioritization effort, which we'll be presenting, and some exciting projects that are coming up in the near future. Grow Solar, which is already launched, and the completion of our first net zero affordable housing project. But I will say, for me, just as important on this slide, whenever I go out and I talk to these state and national audiences, I always say that our successes in the Climate Action Office are the city's successes. It's the result of having strong support among our residents, having a really great and engaged Climate Action Commission, having staff members who are so willing to talk to us about trying things like the first EV in the state. But also, like within the climate office itself, we have really incredible staff who've contributed to these successes. You heard about how Diane's toolkit contributed to the higher quality applications we've gotten this year. Standing next to me in this picture is Megan Hill, who ran a number of our engagement efforts for the last several years, and now Kendall is taking up that mantle. But a lot of these successes you've heard about for the engagement are really attributable to Megan's work. And then Danny, looking cool in the sunglasses, has provided a lot of the analysis for this report and also helps administer, our climate action grants and our Root for Trees grants. So I don't know, really, I think a more appropriate slide to end on would be one where we just kind of cropped me out of this photo, because clearly a lot of credit rightly should go to the other staff in this office, and it's important to me that they're recognized. So that is where we will end for the council presentation and for you all. Is there anything is there anything that struck you as missing or things you really want to make sure we hammer home when we talk to the council tomorrow?
Not about the council presentation, but I'm thinking just a caveat about the partnership with the county on individual private prairies pockets, that sometimes the ordinances of the city need to be changed because it can be such a hurdle for a homeowner to go through all the stipulations. First you got to draw a diagram, you have to do this, you have to do that. It can become so burdensome. Then they just say, no, I'm not going to do that.
This is actually one of the things I love about the county program. I think your point is very well made, that they asked us early on for those regulations, and they're going to work hand in hand with the residents, so the residents don't have to worry about it. And we are just going to hand over the addresses to our inspection staff so they know when someone calls and complains, like, nope, they've already been through the program, we know they check out. And one of the requirements we have is that residents have to submit a maintenance plan, which I'll be honest and tell you is a pretty low barrier. You just have to say, yes, I have a plan to maintain this. But the county is going to submit the maintenance plan that they will have developed for each of these properties, and that will just cover them. So
Great.
yeah. Cool. See, you all are so smart. You hardly need us in the room at all.
Is there any work with HOAs? Because they probably have stricter regulations.
That is a good question. I will reach out to the county and ask what the plan is for HOAs. All right, we are right at time, and I want to be conscious of that for you all. Thanks for going through this presentation with us.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for walking through it. It's incredibly thorough, and I think does a really good job capturing everything. And I mean, I remember when I went through the Climate Ambassador program, you were still doing those yourself as well. So I think you very much deserve to be in the picture as well. So thank you very much to all the staff.
I would be remiss if I didn't say Diane put together this entire deck and was incredibly patient because we wrote it many times over.
Well, it shows that it really, no, I mean, it's very polished and
It looks really
Well
good.
done.
It's a very good
yeah,
overview.
absolutely. Okay, we have no members of the public. For recap, our next meeting is Monday, June 1st, same time, same place. Action items, just real quick.
I am going to send you information on Bike and Beats by email. I will also send you a link to the New York Times article, and I will ask the county what the plan is for working with HOAs on the Pocket Prairie program.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Will we have access to the New York Times article?
Yes, I will send you an unlocked version.
Okay, so then we'll. I think that's it. So motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
And a second.
Work seconds.
Alrighty. And Emma, is this?
It is.
We should acknowledge that too. This
Thank
is
you.
Emma's last meeting with us before she's graduating and moving on. So.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been nice working with you.
Where are you going?
Back to Des Moines for now, and then we'll see.
So, thanks for participating and all of that. So,
Thanks for all your service.
absolutely, yeah. So, with Emma's second, all in favor to adjourn? Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thanks, everybody. See you next month.
Thanks.
Where you land.
Oh, it went well.